Chapter 19. Tia stood outside the door of Ava's office and took a deep breath. She wanted to apologize, but actually being here was another thing entirely. What if Ava slammed the door in her face? What if Justin kicked her out? They had both agreed to meet her here when Tia called, but what if it was just to tease her about how far she'd fallen? "You have to knock," Brody said beside her. She looked up at him, a pained smile on her face. "I know, but what if they slammed the door in my face? I was so awful to them." He laced his fingers through hers and squeezed. "They won't. Besides, you aren't the same person anymore." Right, she wasn't the same person anymore. She no longer cared solely for money, not after 4 attempts on her life. Her priorities had definitely shifted. And while she did want to make enough money to take care of herself and her mother, as she'd promised herself so long ago, she no longer needed to be the best. Just being Tia seemed like enough. She raised her hand and knocked on the door. A moment later, it swung open, and Ava McDermott stared back at her. "Hello, Tia," she said with a slight smile. She stepped back and held the door open. "Won't you come in?" Tia squeezed Brody's hand one more time before letting go of it to crutch into the waiting area of Ava's office. Justin sat in one of the chairs there and rose as they approached. For a moment, no one said anything, and the silence sat heavy in the room. Tia cleared her throat, forcing her nerves to stop fluttering. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." "You said it was important," Ava said as she sat down and motioned for everyone else to do the same. "It is." Tia glanced over at Brody, who smiled, and motioned for her to continue. "I came to apologize to you both. A few weeks ago, I landed in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it almost killed me. But as I healed, I realized how awful I'd been. I'm working to change, but before I could, I needed to apologize to those I've wronged." She chuckled ruefully. "It's been an awfully long list." Justin glanced over at Ava and then back at Tia. "We're sorry for what you've been through, Tia. It appears like a lot, but we forgave you a long time ago." Tia's eyes widened and she blinked at them. "You did?" "Of course we did," Ava said. "None of us are perfect, and we both know that we've made poor decisions in our past as well, but God has forgiven us. However, we couldn't gain that forgiveness from Him if we didn't also forgive those who wronged us." Tears filled Tia's eyes, blinding her vision for a moment. "You two are both so amazing. I hope that I can learn from your compassion." Ava smiled at her. "I think you already have." Brody stared at the woman next to him as they drove to their final destination before returning home. Though her fingers still sported acrylic nails, nothing else about her appearance looked like the rich woman he had first seen when he pulled her from the wrecked sports car. Her long blonde hair was pulled back in a simple loose pony, and her outfit was a t-shirt and shorts with no designer tag in sight. He'd wondered if she might revert when she saw her old things and outfits in her apartment, but instead, she'd decided to hire someone to sell it all and send her the money. "That way I don't have to pay to have it shipped," she said. But he thought it was because those things no longer suited her. She still was very different from Rachel, more extroverted than she'd been and able to spit words out faster than he could listen half the time, especially when she was excited. But despite her differences, she had one vital thing in common, the ability to make him feel like he was the only man in the room and that he could do anything. He'd certainly proved that to himself over the last few weeks, as his healing hand and head proved. "You ready?" he asked as he pulled up in front of the rundown trailer. He had a hard time believing that this was where she'd grown up, but recognition mingled with fear covered her face, and he knew it was true. Her shoulders pulled back with her breath. "Yeah, I guess I am." But her eyes stared out the window, and he wondered if she really were. It was one thing to apologize to people you once considered friends. It was another thing entirely to apologize to the woman you promised to provide for, and then failed. Brody turned off the ignition and walked around to Tia's side to help her out. He handed her the crutches from the back seat and followed her up the overgrown pathway to the front door. She paused, took another deep breath, and then knocked on the door. A moment later, the door swung open, and a woman, who looked like a much older version of Tia, opened the door. Her blonde hair was streaked with gray, and from the wrinkles and age spots dotting her face, it appeared life had not been easy on her. Beside him, Tia sniffed and covered her mouth with her hand. But the woman's face transformed as recognition dawned in her eyes, and a smile lit her face. "Tia?" "Hi, Mama. I know I'm a little late, but I came to fulfill my promise." Tears filled the woman's eyes, and she pulled Tia in for a hug. "I never gave up hope, Tia. Even when you stopped calling and coming by, I prayed God would send you home one day, and He has." She pulled back, holding Tia by the upper arms, and then her eyes flicked to the side. "And you've brought a friend. Who is this?" "Dr. Brody Cavanaugh, ma'am. It's a pleasure to meet you." He held out his hand, and the woman smiled as she shook it. "A doctor? Well, I have missed a lot. How about you come inside and we can catch up?" She stepped back and held the door open, and Brody followed Tia into the home she had grown up in. The inside, though sparse, was neat and tidy. Her mother led them to the living room and a well-worn couch where they sat and stared at one another for an uncomfortable moment. "Can I get you something to drink?" the woman asked. "No, Mama, we aren't staying long." The woman's face fell. "Oh, well, I'm glad you stopped by for as long as you could." "Mama, I want you to come back to Fire Beach with me." The woman blinked at her. What do you mean?" Tia leaned forward and took her mother's hands. "I've missed too much the last few years, Mom. I don't want to miss any more time with you. I've sold my home in California, and I'm moving to Fire Beach to start over. I'd like you to come with me." But I have a job here." "And you can have one there if you want. I know a great restaurant that's going to need a hostess when I return to writing, but you've worked your entire life for me so I could have a better life. Now I'd like to give back to you. I've already found the perfect place. All it's missing is you." Brody held his breath as he watched emotions flutter across Tia's mother's face. If she said no, Tia would be crushed, but she had prepared herself for the possibility as they drove here. However, he hoped she said yes. Family was important, and he knew being able to provide for her mother would be the final block in Tia's healing process. "What do I need to bring?" her mother finally said as she smiled widely at Tia. "Nothing, Mama. Just you." Forgetting her crutches, Tia launched herself out of the couch and into her mother's arms. Brody smiled at the touching scene. Somehow he felt that no matter what life threw at her now, Tia would be all right.